welcome everybody. This is exciting because we have cookies, but I also brought something far less exciting than cookies. But I was like, well, we need some food, so I brought, which will go very well with cookies, some citrus. So we have
Thank you.
sustenance.
Yeah.
I just feel like, I don't know, do you all eat dinner before? I can't eat dinner.
No,
by
I can't
5:30,
eat
so I eat dinner when I go home, but if I get home, I'm like, ravenous.
Yeah, or it's too late to eat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you all. Great, so. We have, we have a quorum, so let's just get started. Chase, I think, is coming and potentially Cecilia is joining us via Zoom. And I know that, Julian is not gonna join us. He's out of the country. So.
So where are the cameras?
It's the owl.
That's the owl. Okay, great.
Mhm.
That helps me. I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I think no, it doesn't move actually, it's just, it shows all of us. Except for Ian.
Right.
I think the principle focuses on the person who's speaking, but if we're all.
Let's test it.
I
Yeah,
thought
it
it
does.
was, oh, I thought it went to the cutest one. Isn't how it works? It's on Melissa and I, so I just assumed. Great,
So anyway, we have a quorum of Daniel, Brad, Melissa, Roy Preston, and Ian Stokes. And we hope, you were saying we hope Cecilia will join.
I didn't actually see the email, cause
She said she would come in by Zoom.
oh, okay, great. And Chase, I think, I talked to him last night, and I think he was on his. So
Steve and Brad and I emailed for our working group, and he said he's going to do it tonight.
oh, okay. And from the public, we have Sam, Pablo, Nancy, Dan, Hi everyone.
There's Cecilia.
Oh, there's Cecilia. Nice to see you all. Or at least EC your names. Would anyone like to be?
Research that was done in North America, Europe, all that.
I
Is
don't know
that
what that was.
this or that?
I don't know.
I don't know what that was. Just ignore that. Would anyone like to be minute taker?
I would love to, but I have to say, my hearing is lousy, in this room, the acoustics are.
There.
I will if necessary, but I prefer.
I'll do it. I'll be cryptic, but I'll do it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Oh,
Appreciate that. And can we have a timekeeper? Somebody keep us on track.
I'm doing that anyway for the video.
Okay, so
I can-
just give us a.
Yeah, I'll
date.
give that to you.
Great. Did everyone have a chance to look over the January minutes? And are there any edits that folks want to make?
I saw that, who took the minutes? You did. I volunteered to be in a working group, but my name was in parentheses.
Oh.
My name was in parentheses, so I
Probably
didn't know
because I
what
wanted
that
to double check. that.
denoted, if that meant like you don't need an extra person or.
Well, I sent those to you, Brad. Remember, yeah, and so let me look back at my notes and I think.
And you questioned that, I thought.
Well, I think
Or
the
you questioned
parentheses
something.
was just people who were like, I'm happy to help, but I don't necessarily need to be on the committee or something like that. I put.
Yeah,
Okay, so,
let me see if I.
Oh, with the zoning.
yes,
Right.
so did you not want me to be on that one?
Yeah, that is up to you. If you would
Okay.
like to be.
Okay.
I would embrace that fully. And if you,
I didn't know why I was in parentheses, if there was a question about that or.
I have you in parentheses here and I think if I
Okay.
remember correctly, you were like. Maybe sounded somewhat like slightly non-committal, so I
Okay.
didn't want to commit, but if you want to commit,
I am happy to commit
Cool.
to that one, yeah,
great.
so.
So we'll change that, unparenthesize Melissa. Any other additions, subtractions? Semicolons, it should be colons. Okay, can I get a motion?
I'll do it. I move to accept the January minutes.
I second it,
All in favor?
yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Great,
Can I ask a quick question as a minute taker?
Yeah.
I'm assuming I'm gonna be writing down all the folks that are on Zoom?
Yeah,
Okay,
yep,
I think I've done that, so
Yeah.
great.
yeah, you just, everyone's.
Know someone if there's new arrivals, because I
Yeah.
may miss it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I see, Ian, there's one chat, which I think someone had said that there was, that we were just muted, but. So I think we're good now.
Hope says you're muted.
We're not muted though, that was just prior to when we finally get started.
You're okay now.
Yep. Yep. Okay, any additions or changes to the agenda?
Good. I believe, right?
Yep.
I would take 5 minutes at some point to, Talk about the-
I apologize. You asked-
that's fine,
You sent me that email 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
about the power line.
And you're lost.
Yep,
Right, can I just, we'll put that in when we have.
that's
we'll see how
fine,
things shake out.
that's fine, yep.
Great. Um. Okay, so are there any updates from working groups? Knowing that we do have the RFP review coming later on in the meeting. And so, but we actually do have. Well, we're sort of already at time, but any updates that folks want to share out of anything that they've worked on in the last month? This would be a great time to do that before we sort of jump into our conversation.
Yeah, I can speak for wildlife.
Okay.
Sam and Chase and I met a couple times. or at
Once
least-
in person and then a lot of emails, like.
Yeah, and so we've trying to put that together. It's more of a plan for a plan than the plan itself, how we can go about creating this. Since our last discussion, I think might have been last week, John Cart had stepped up. I contacted him and asked him if he could offer some help, because we talked about trying to get some outside expertise in, and he checked around his department, and got Andrea Shortsleeve, who is a member of that Conservation Commission panel, and she is offered to help us down the line.
Oh, cool.
So at some point, I think we can fire this thing back to them. They've already made a couple comments. We were talking about not trying to focus, like inventory every critter that's up there, every plant, but to focus on keystone umbrella species. And hopefully, if we track those guys, we'll get a general sense of the integrity of the whole system there. And that's kind of where we stand.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Are you done? Brad?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Cecilia, we saw your comment and we'll just circle back to you when we're done with these updates, if that's okay. And I'm sorry you have laryngitis, that's a bummer.
So that was, Cecilia put in the chat, but she hasn't.
Yeah. We'll just circle back. I haven't done anything with the zoning administrator, so no updates there. We'll be talking with the RFP later. So Julian and I did meet about having this hotspots conversation, and so that was really helpful. We kind of figured out how to frame the conversation and put together an agenda and things like that, so. Yeah,
Can we maybe change it to challenges, just
sure.
for some feedback that hotspots is kind of weird. Hotspots are what you get when your boots are too tight or.
No trauma, brings it past no trauma.
Could be.
Yes.
Challenge areas.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I found it hard to land on a name because it implies some type of friction when I don't know. I think friction is just inherent in so much of what land managers do, so it doesn't seem like it's. I couldn't find a right title, but yes, we can call it
Challenge is great.
challenges.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to change the name. Actually, my suggestion, I don't think it was because Blissed side. I had some.
Yours was blisters.
The challenges.
Blisters.
Mine was gonna be sticking points. I think.
Sticking points.
Challenges, good.
Right.
And then the laundry list, I know there's been a lot of work on that, I don't know if someone wants to provide a quick
Oh, yeah,
update on that as well.
I could. That's right, thank you. I'm getting my working groups mixed up. I think we've gotten to a point on that. Julian, I don't think he's weighed in more recently, but Sam has also helped on that.
Can you define laundry list?
Oh, sorry, laundry list is, and I may be wrong on this, I take it as meaning, bring some order to the two laundry lists, actually, which one is the way the webpage looks, which really hops around between stuff, you know, there's no even flow of information from it. To try to make that more user-friendly, kind of gear it also to the visitor to the forest. There's little there now, and it just jumps around. The other laundry list is the amount of the website, and the other would be the vast store of information on Ian's WordPress site, and maybe try to bring that, you know, some order to that. And maybe, so we could maybe migrate that into ours, whatever. But that,
So for the public, can we just call this website and WordPress reorganization?
reorganization
Yeah.
is better.
We actually called it a laundry basket, I missed
Laundry
it,
basket.
because it was,
You're
you know, we
right.
have this
That's
website that we
right.
just dump everything into, and we're like, all right, we have to actually sort through the laundry
That's right.
basket.
That's right, I forgot, you're right, that's much more communicative, but.
And I'd say that website that I've been putting together and maintaining, it's my go-to place for information.
Yeah, yeah,
And it could be, you know, I try to organize, it could be improved.
oh, yeah,
So in principle, I'm really welcome suggestions,
Yeah.
and equally, it's there for the taking, you know, I'm really welcome that if it can be,
right,
And the public has access to that?
that's it.
The public has access to it.
Yeah, if you
Good.
have the URL, you can access.
Yeah, isn't it, info.acf.wordpress.com, I think is
Yeah.
the URL.
Although to be, I don't know, I've tried to search for it in the past, and, I don't know if the SEO is very optimized, it's hard to find, and so we should put some links for.
what, just jumping back to
Yeah.
that, what would be I could send this around, even right now, I think,
We've already had that in our packet.
you do? Oh, good. Thank you.
One step ahead of the game.
Who did that?
So let's go back to Cecilia, who had Ian, could you bring up the chat? Yeah, just to the left, keep going, there you go,
Should be.
so keep going, a little bit,
Yeah,
yeah, there you
I think
go.
it moved. It was in a different spot. Okay.
Draft of trails to Shipmonkeys.
Should I read it? I can see it.
I think we could probably just all read it.
Good.
Yep, yep. Noted and appreciated, Cecilia. And Ian, could you just scroll up about the Cecilia's previous comment? Yes, so Cecilia, happy to update. Do you wanna, is the text that you just put in to the chat, is that what you want updated in the minutes? Cause we can just add that language right into the minutes if we wanted. This is where having a hybrid option is amazing. Someone can't talk and they can just write. Yes, yeah. Yep, that's great, right, so noted that though Cecilia's name is not on one specific working group, integrating the land use acknowledgement, but also the whole body of work that Cecilia has been doing with the cultural history. And certain policies and practices that are specific to indigenous groups. Will be integrated into all of these groups in different ways, so that is reflected throughout the document, and so. There'll probably come a time. There'll probably come a time in all of our working groups where maybe we meet with Cecilia or, you know, and sort of. Get feedback on that or figure out ways to incorporate, or just, you know, we can have that front of mind as we're working. But also, we wanna use the resources that we have, which is not just Cecilia, but a whole network of people who've helped on that part of the management plan, who can also. Be a guide for us in doing that, so, yeah.
That's a great idea.
And just for the record, I'm saving the chat
Great,
actually to my computer, because then from my laptop I can probably send it.
Right.
That would be helpful.
and so.
Nice.
Chase,
Hey,
So if, right, you could. Come on, if you could note for the minutes, if you could just copy and paste Cecilia's chat, which will be saved.
yep, I have a note that I gotta get that.
Okay,
Yep.
great, and so.
Yep.
Instead of putting it in the previous meetings notes, we'll integrate it into this meeting.
Yep.
notes.
I have that, I just. I need to get it somehow.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And we can do. I mean, before the meeting is done, we can actually do a copy paste of all the notes. So we can get it to you electronically.
That's great.
So at the end of the meeting, just copy the comments. And then just send them to,
From the chat.
yeah, from the chat, and then just send them to
Yeah.
Rose.
And the other thing is, since we're recording, there is also a transcript available of this meeting.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
It's usually available within maybe a couple of days of the meeting.
Right, and I'll draft these and get them to both of you to edit and well before the next meeting. That's
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
to get it off my table, just.
Right. So, yeah, cookies and this. So we'll start our sort of challenges conversation, which is our next agenda item C. Wait, sorry. We're on B.
Yeah, the vacancy.
Yeah, so this is just, so we have one vacancy, and so upcoming, the town will post. And we can post as well to Front Porch Forum to remind folks to please apply for the vacant seat. Also knowing that it's a Richmond Trails Committee seat to fill, which doesn't mean that we can't ask people to do that, but that's another.
And at
consideration.
large, because I have to apply,
Oh, right,
I've
right.
applied again,
I have
so
to
there,
apply too.
right, so I'm an at-large. There's a
Right.
trails, and then, I'm not sure,
I'm a
Conservation.
conservation commissioner.
all right, so there's
Three,
three.
yeah,
So
Yours is the representative position, and
Yes.
the other one is the recommendation.
Yes.
For sale.
yeah, which is Brad.
actually, in the packet for this meeting, there are some notes about posting these three vacancies. And a schedule, I think that's in the agenda, that we really should get. We should post that there are vacancies by the end of this month.
Yeah.
So that the month of March is available for applicants. Of April is available for review by the three committees, and then the select board in May.
Yep, so this, what we need to decide on now is, are we all okay with the language that's in the current application, which is what we use to post a Front Porch Forum to have people apply?
But it was good.
Okay, yeah, so there are three pieces to it, and so someone should kind of meld them together and send them to Duncan, who can then, I mean, he has a standard format anyway, but if we want to add explanation about the role of committee members, the special situation and other details that are in that text. Somebody should just sort of, well, either get it to Duncan as it is and let them figure it out, or maybe do a little bit of editing before sending it to Duncan. I'm willing to sort of hold those things together into an announcement that I can send to him, and he has the ultimate responsibility, I think, for posting.
That sounds great. Yeah, I thought the language, both for the one first form and the one that I wrote,
Yeah.
is fine. I was like, oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's the pep talk. I think it's helpful that applicants sort of
Yeah,
know what we do and what we're looking for and what's involved.
I think it's important that whatever the language is, that it reflects the spirit and culture of what we're trying to do. And so it's, I think we can get bogged down in the details, or we can sort of just, you know, show how much fun we are and how much food we bring.
Yeah, I can see this.
So, great. So Ian, you will take care of just collating that and then sending it up to Duncan.
Yeah, I can copy it to you, I can copy it to everybody if that's, there's no harm in that.
Yeah, sure, you can do
Copy it
that.
to everybody, and when I send it to Duncan by the end of this month, which I'll be sure.
But it sounds like we're pretty good on the language, right? Okay, onto the main meal of the evening, which is, talking about the challenges conversation. And so Julie and I were able to meet, and he had some really wise advice, and he just said, don't worry, everything's gonna be fine. And so we'll just move forward in that spirit. But no, we had a really nice conversation and put together an agenda. Yeah, I think that we're gonna have the ability to do this not just once, but a couple times. And I think it's worth us putting in the brain power and the time to work through some of these hiccups that have come up along the road, where I think as a committee, we don't have to necessarily be in agreement, but we have to be able to see what's a way forward and where are areas of compromise, or where are areas that we can actually be better than we were before. And I just go back to thinking about, you know, what does the management plan say? And part of the thing, and I reread it actually this morning, and part of the thing that really struck me is that I think that sometimes we want like a silver bullet, like we want an answer for it to say like, do this thing. And it definitely doesn't say, do this thing. And so I think our charge as a committee is to do all the things as best we can. And so that is the hard part of doing this, is that we're trying to do multiple things, but that, I think a lot of good things can come out of trying to do, trying to do what's right for the community and representing the various asks. So I thought for this conversation, we could start with just identifying what we think of are some of the areas of challenges. And maybe if, right, because you're taking notes, if you could also be kind of a scribe for, you know, taking down these as we kind of share them out. And then I thought what we could do is, I think that's gonna be a conversation in and of itself, is sort of to say like, okay, what do we see as these areas? And then as best we can also try to categorize them. So we might see themes that come up. And I think it'll be more manageable for us as a group to jump into a discussion if we can see like, okay, these 5 things, they all fall under the theme of whatever it is, you know, ATV access or whatever. I don't think that'll be a thing, but you know, we can kind of categorize things, and then we can make them into bite-sized chunks, so we can discuss certain chunks of things that'll be a little bit more, at least in my mind, a little bit more manageable than a very long list. How do folks feel about that? Is it good?
Great.
Okay, I also have some notes from Julian, and so I'll be both sharing out like my own thoughts, but I also, at some point, will speak on behalf of Julian. Actually, do you all mind? I wonder if we should close that, because they're gonna start doing
Can we close the door for an open meeting?
Yeah,
or like you're even just like halfway.
it's
halfway.
because it's advertised that we're in this room in several places
Okay.
coming up the stairs, so if someone's trying to find us, they can consult us.
That's
on
all
it.
right.
I've been in other meetings that will, yeah. So I want to just start with, Julian had, you know, Julian's professional job is being, he is actually in Panama right now doing mediation between an indigenous tribe and an oil company who, and so he has bigger fish to fry, he has big fish to fry. But he sent me a list of 10 guidelines for having, you know, what are basically difficult conversations in which groups come together and have to kind of find common ground. And so I want to just start with that and read those out, because I do think that they set a good sort of standard of approach that I think this group can kind of embrace. And I think we've already done this in many ways, but I think these are kind of specific and interesting. So the first one is listen with curiosity. The second one is don't interrupt.
Are you gonna send me these?
Yeah, I can
Okay,
send them to you.
otherwise I'm
Actually,
gonna,
Why don't we do this? I'm gonna,
Something like put it in the chat.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do.
Or present your screen.
You could put it into my chat, would that be helpful?
Yep, Ian, I just emailed them to you.
Okay.
So if you can put them in the chat. So I'll read them while Ian's putting them in the chat, but we'll have them up there. So listen with curiosity is the first one. Second one is don't interrupt except to ask for clarification, but be as brief as possible. The third one is ask questions about others' perspectives. The fourth is try to understand the needs and interests of your speaker. Fifth one is try to get the other more of what you understand, try to get the other more of what you. Oh, try to get more of what another, try to get the other more of what you understand they need and want, make their concerns your concerns. The text of the easement and or the management plan and the conclusions of the papers written. Well, like, sorry. That one is really loud. In other words, the answers to our issues are found only in our ability to find common ground. It's a shorthand version.
find common ground.
Find common ground. Look for ways to build a complete package of things that you can get the most for the most people rather than seeking to negotiate each issue separately. Separate the people from the problems we're working on. Worry most about what we can control and least about what we can't. And we don't have to solve everything. Pretty good advice. Great, thank you, Ian, for putting those out. So I'm gonna just open up the floor, and I know folks have probably done some thinking about this or looked back at some documents and maybe have some ideas about starting to put together kind of a list of challenges, places where we see we're getting from that. So I'm gonna just open the floor to folks.
Connections to adjacent landowners.
Great,
Are we just listening?
yeah, just.
Right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Making ecological protection aspirational and mandating trail routes.
Okay, got an ecological, say it again, please.
Making ecological protections aspirational. You put quotes around that. And specific trail routes and mandating specific trail routes. A lot of the stuff I build up really isn't a challenge, it's gonna be easy. So, but I'll try to find challenges, go ahead.
I liked what Melissa said about connecting with landowners, because oftentimes the word is connectivity. And I get confused with the word connectivity because there's human connectivity and wildlife connectivity, but we're not defining connectivity. So it's helpful for me to connections with adjoining properties is a human activity, I think, what you're saying.
I'm talking about the human activity of
So-
connecting the forest property to
Yep.
adjacent landowners' properties.
Right.
You're typing these.
Well, I'm doing it for my own, because I'm
Oh,
facilitating
okay.
a conversation, I wanna.
Okay. I could try and type them in the chat.
Oh, it's okay, yeah.
I can't.
kind of a broad spectrum one is, I put defining conservation.
Let's just say mountain biking and the impact of mountain biking.
Select board approval.
I also have,
Okay, hang on.
oops, sorry, man. I also have zones of influence and buffer zones.
Beat me to the punch. Yeah, that's a good one. I think, one thing, I don't know if it's exactly a challenge, but looking at what's changed since 19 or 2018, when this was, when the first plan was written.
Like,
What do we, what new pressures, what new knowledge do we have? What new threats are there? It's a different kind of landscape than it was 5 years ago. We know a lot more about the forest than we did when the first one was written. And how can we incorporate that?
so maybe like how the management plan does not really reflect maybe the current moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's not completely off, but yeah.
I mean, taking that forward, monitoring for impacts.
Yeah.
I'll also add to that the user experience and how we, and I mean this as a we, like, I think everyone does it, how we all think the forest should be experienced.
Let's call it human experience, huh?
Mhm.
Using instead of using.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, human experience.
I'm going to suggest, just as an overall umbrella, the sinuosity plan, because there's been so much discussion and angst around that I feel like it is a challenge itself, trying to go back and find what is good or what doesn't work. It's kind of like
Yeah.
digging in an old hole instead of digging a new hole, right? It's got a lot of baggage with it, so I think that's a challenge area. It's just working with what we currently have, very broad.
Connected to that. I think as the process goes on longer, it becomes harder to honor the public comment from now, a couple of years ago. And so I put public comment burnout from like, how many times can we ask the average public person back to the table? And so how do we honor their voices?
Interesting. Yeah.
I think on because of the utility upgrades of the road system, the forest has changed a lot to me in the last 3 years. With the new road system that's there. I don't know if it's bad, that's kind of bad for me, it's just, it's quite a change.
And then, Cecilia's, yeah, Chase echoed sort of Cecilia's thought there about monitoring. Bye-bye, Lisa. Active management, right? And I'm gonna add to that. Only in the context of adaptive management, so Celia, I'm getting your adaptive management and also mapping. Mapping, you know, sort of like. Whew, you know, like. We have so many maps, but it always feels like we don't have the right map, so it's sort of like. How do we, you know. How do we get useful maps without overwhelming ourselves and the public?
Ian, you're typing into the chat?
I'm trying to keep up with.
Yeah,
With.
I wouldn't-
In this room, yeah.
I wouldn't characterize mine as like I'm advocating for private. If there's an issue, it's actually prioritizing, recreation explicitly over conservation, ecological stuff. So it's the loss of balance being built right into it, you know, putting the finger on the scale on one side. And then actually in a very narrow form of recreation.
I mean, if you look up the easement. It really, purposes of the easement break down into.
Well, we're not getting there yet. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I'm trying to interpret.
Yeah, but just for the rest, but the issue isn't prioritizing conservation.
So I think what he'd
Seek
like to
balance.
say is conservation, recreation balance.
Yeah, and
Okay,
so that would work.
And Ian, can you just scroll down again? Make a message.
For us.
Yeah, right.
I'm just gonna keep eating these. Forget the minutes.
I put action versus legislation. I mean, I felt in community conversations, a lot of tension, understanding, we've been talking about this for 5 years and they'll always, and I've voiced it myself, saying there'll always be changes to make in the management plan. And there'll always be things that we're not happy about that are imperfect. Right. And so is there a logical, or just the balance between those two?
And I know we have been offering members of the public a chance to speak at the end, but I would also just like to invite members of the public, if they have things to add, just please add it to the chat. It's probably the easiest way. If you'd like to make a comment, raise your hand, but I think if folks have thoughts that they'd like to add, we'd love to hear your thoughts, and probably the easiest place to do that is in the chat.
I had one other that I felt like at times that the conversation around ACF is kind of a proxy conversation for a lack of a conversation about a larger town vision. And so a lot of the sentiments that play out there are really concerns about the direction of the town. And the lack of a visible plan for how recreation or conservation is going in the future, right? People like, this becomes the place where all those fears and hopes get played out as if it's setting a precedent or what.
but if you, isn't the town plan, the document, the town plan helpful enough?
Maybe my perception is that sometimes I sense we're really talking about is like, what's the future of this town?
Yeah, I think that the town plan is a great place to go. I think it's pretty good on conservation, but it doesn't say much about recreation. And I think the town really ought to tackle that. So, but.
Yeah, right, I mean, I hear in people's voices, what is the limit to recreation development? And other people are saying, will there be no future opportunity for recreational development?
Yeah. And what are we talking about when we talk about recreation?
Yeah.
Cause it's ball fields or,
Right,
you know, pickleball or, you know, hiking trails, biking trails,
right.
photography and all kinds.
And we still have not ever put someone into the NBA as a state. So I would call it a basketball emergency.
There must be somebody.
I think we might be the only state. I don't think we've ever had.
Is it true?
No, I'm trying to think of, no, I can't. Baseball, yes, but
Bernie didn't play basketball?
he did, yeah,
He did,
yeah, he's a good basketball player.
yeah.
So I'm just organizing these a little bit, but feel free to add, anything else that comes in.
I don't know how much of a hotspot has been so far, but cost and money will be when, as we
That's a good.
get into it.
Good point.
In 2018, what it might have cost to put in what was planned would be vastly different than what that would cost today.
Sure, it will be.
Would be a challenge if the zoning or, you know, DRB engineering plan and stuff becomes.
Yeah.
It seems.
Yeah.
Get very pricey, very.
Yeah.
quickly.
I was wondering whether to bring that, like, I don't know that it's a hot spot probably between us and,
Well,
Define it for me slightly.
compliance.
yeah, zoning compliance
Yeah,
for
okay.
trails.
Yeah,
Zoning,
and I'd say town plan too, you know, it's not a regulation, but it's, you know, the goals, the policies. It's probably not even a policy, but the goals and objectives,
Aspirational.
yeah. That is aspiration, yes.
I think, to me, there's a really important issue, which is there are existing paths, trails, roads, means for people to get around in the forest, and they do. You know, if you go out this time, you know, you see a lot of footprints in the snow on the old Bass Trail, on the forest roads, on the trails that do exist lower down. And then under the power lines, people travel along there. So at this point, the forest is providing that resource for people to get out and enjoy that forest. And connect with, certainly with BYCC and with Sunshine if you're ambitious. What is the sticking point here with the two of them? And I said this before, I think we really have to get to grips with what are the criteria for establishing a new trail and or maintaining an existing one. And then secondary to that, what are the provisions for identifying a trail for mechanized use, bicycle use? Because there's a big difference. You know, especially this time of year, you can walk throughout the forest very easily. But you can't ride a bike. My understanding is for bicycle use, according to the easements, so you have to have a trail and it has to be recognized for that. So what we lack in the management plan is the criteria for maintaining an existing trail, the criteria for establishing a new trail, and the criteria for designating a trail for bicycle use. And there, you know, the management plan as it exists makes a start, and it's one to start. I mean, it uses the three types of environmental protection that are identified in the easement and states which ones are protected and what the buffer zone around them is, and then the implication is the trail shouldn't go there. So you know, there are bits and pieces in there, but it's not sufficient guideline for what can be a trail and what should be a trail.
So that's your challenge too. Kind of say that a little more succinctly is to establish. Could you say it just in like a couple sentences, so I make sure you
Yeah,
understand what your challenge
I
is?
did try, I said, but what we need is criteria for
Criteria.
maintaining existing trail
Okay.
or path or road. Criteria for establishing a new trail. Where should it go? What are the constraints on it? And thirdly, how does one designate any of those trails for bicycle use? And
So,
existing
Criteria for building and criteria for use of trails.
Yeah, for designating the usage of trails.
One thing, you made me think of this, Ian, is trying to figure out what is the conservation easement trying to protect? As the plan states, it sets minimal standards. You know, but when you think about it, what is it trying to do? For instance, you know, I know it's got a 50-foot buffer, which is a standard erosion protective buffer around streams. But it doesn't put a buffer on the forest. It seems to be geared towards protecting the plant life, you know, which is definitely out in both the trees, the oaks and what have you in those communities. But it's notes their importance, say, to wildlife. But you could still run traffic right along the edge and not, you know, just not conflict with the easement. And it makes me wonder, what was their focus then? They may be more of a timber focus, you know, protecting the diversity of plant life, tree life up there. And then maybe they haven't thought about other things that might be protected. So I don't know.
How will we get answers to that?
I just talked to VLT, I guess.
Okay, so your challenges, the challenge you're suggesting we put on the list is what did the easement really mean to protect?
Yeah,
Besides the
Yeah.
specific things.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do we interpret these?
How can you interpret it?
yeah.
Okay.
I just wanna note, Cecilia's comment about, yeah, Cecilia, I took notes, and so I've got Chase's comment about defining conservation in there, and we'll put that in the chat for everyone to read. So we've got that, and then I also added resolving how to handle sort of existing trails, roads, which fits under the category that Ian was talking about, which is criteria for maintaining, you know, our current trail infrastructure. And then Dan, I just want to go back to you. You have a comment about incorporating ecological surveys, and I wondered if the challenge there is sort of how to do that, or you know what maybe if you could just point me in the direction of like what the challenge is around that. And then you also have process for flagging and designing trails. Maybe if you can unmute if you like, but just you can clarify what the challenge is.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just talking about there's a lot of great reports that expert papers and stuff that have been written about the forests, like Meredith Naughton, the UVM Naturalist Group, Audubon, VLT. They've all done some great things. And I just think we should use all of those resources in addition to the work that Arrowwood did as we go through this process. And then process for flagging the trails just means, you know, how we go from the design to actually tying ribbons on trees, and just have some sort of a cohesive process for doing that.
Great, thank you, Dan. So I wanna allow us to sort of fully get our ideas out there, but I also am aware of time, so I also wanna like, you know, if we feel like, okay, we've got a lot of stuff here, I think it's a great thing to dig into some of these, and I think we don't necessarily need to do, you know, we won't get through this list tonight. But we've identified some really good things.
Yeah.
While we were talking, I put them into 4 different categories. And so we don't have to use these categories, but this might just help facilitate a conversation for the next 25 minutes because it allows us to kind of tackle one area. So the 4 categories I came up with, and Ian, I'm gonna send these to you right now via email. And can you just put them in the chat?
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I add one more
Yeah.
thing to the list? I feel a tension around starting over because we have so many new members, and I know that all of you have been involved all along, but like all of the planning and work from the last iteration we haven't totally brought up, and we're charting new courses, so I feel tension around that. Because it's happened several times, I guess.
Great. I also CC'd you, right? So. So one thing, so my 4 categories I just put together are ecological and recreation sort of imbalances. We had 4 items kind of talking about that. I have one about just ecology, sort of like the detail, like ecological features of the course and how we learn more about that. Then one specific to recreation, and then one category on process, you know, how rather than result, but how we're going about doing things. Ian can put those in the chat. Do folks have a place they want to start? I know some of these are like big things, and we could, you know, pick off a few of them. You know, the ecological sort of recreation imbalance is just randomly at the top of my list, but you know, on there we have the sort of like making ecological protections aspirational, Brad, like you were saying, action versus legislation. You know, the tension of like talking about this for a long time versus like, you know, when do we do something? Mandating specific trail routes and the idea of connectivity. I don't know, I'm curious to hear what folks think. Or is there, you know, a specific item that we want to start with?
Sometimes it feels good to start with a low hanging fruit, like one that, but I don't know if that's what we want to do. I'm just throwing that out as a possibility, something that we could actually say, oh, check that one off, or maybe we want to dive into like the big heavy one. I don't know.
Well, we could do this. There's an ecology category, which I think has some ones that we could actually check, but I think we get hung up on, but we could check off, which is zones of influence and buffer zones. The mapping piece and monitoring for impacts and how we monitor in the context of adaptive management. That might be one that we could start with and kind of get the juices flowing a little and.
Well, I can, what, is there a goal of each, like, something that we're hoping to? Are we just sharing thoughts on each of these?
I think well. Be quiet, what are we talking about? Let's answer that. I have an idea, but.
Go ahead.
Anyone else have an idea?
Cool. I think, you know, just talking through would help, you know, and, you know, all in good faith and.
Yeah, I'm
you know,
okay. with that.
Respect and all that, you know?
But I think then goal is, I mean, just to keep in mind is eventually we're going to settle on something and vote on this, sort of like a big overall
Right,
picture is where we have to go, right?
right.
Yeah, I can see us, so for example, with this zones of influence and buffer zones, I can see us as an end result saying. For right now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna decide on what we think of our reasonable buffer zones. And sort of, we might even say like, we're gonna put up, you know, we're gonna make this. An important part of any trail plan or any, you know, any work that's being done there. And here's how we're gonna treat zones of influence, you know, like this is how we're gonna think about it. So that's kind of like a real world application of something.
Yeah. And they're tied, I mean, it's really, the number in my head anyway, is the same. You know, if you have a 200-foot zone of influence and you need a 200-foot buffer. The zone of influence being, you know, how far from the trail, some average too, because it varies like crazy, but the distance from a trail that you want to by which you want to avoid sensitive areas. So you would have, you know, you can put a recognizing the X number of feet zone of influence, the area where wildlife will be disturbed and, you know, maybe run. Or, you know, change their feeding habits, reproduction habits, you know, denning, whatever. That distance is what you want to draw around your sensitive areas, the sensitive habitats, you know, where they eat, where they seek shelter, where they move, and that type of thing. So it's, you know, they're real, in a way, they're really, it's the same number. It's just called, it's just a different term, whether you're talking about the resource or the trail. That's all. Or the activity, actually, not just a trail.
Right, and I actually disagree with that approach, and I can see kind of, Brad, where you're going with it, but my reading of the zone of influence is that it's, you know, you have a hiker in the forest and they're gonna have an impact on some animals at some point, you know, along their journey. But that what the management plan calls for and the easement calls for are very specific buffers around things like vernal pools, where they're not looking at sort of the impact on, say, salamanders, but they're looking at, say, hydrological impacts, vegetation impacts. So I think that there's a clear directive from the easement about the sensitive areas and the buffers that we have to provide. So, you know, we can't put a trail through a wetland. We know that from the easement.
Right.
Actually, the easement says we can actually put a trail through a wetland, but I don't think we're going to. Well, that's where we, you know, that's where the easement is not, it's not the all-knowing easement, right? It is a guiding document and we can use our best judgment when we're doing things.
Well, the minimal standard, we
Yeah.
have to follow,
Yeah,
but we can exceed.
yes.
That's why I brought up, it'd be good to know, what are they trying to protect? Because if they're worried about the dry oak stands, and their main value is mass, providing food to wildlife.
Right.
And, but they're, they don't care about, you know, that you have 50 people running through there every day.
Well, and that's,
Running next to it. You don't put the trail right through it. But I think we have to recognize that there are these zones of influence around human activity and the impact on wildlife, and which is why New Hampshire goes for 400 feet and Naughton recognizes 300. And between the two of them, it's something like 600 studies. Now there may be overlaps, but one of them is like 300 studies, you know, behind her recommendation. The other is, I don't know, but I think New Hampshire is 250 or so behind their recommendation for what the protective distance ought to be if you don't want to wreck the ecological integrity of these places.
Yeah, if I could jump in there, because I think zone of influence is something that has emerged really since Arrowwood and Sinuosity. And I see it as really important in trail planning because it informs us where kind of trail in general, like if there's a zone of influence around a trail, then maybe a trail shouldn't be in the northwest one, and that sort of arose as a topic. But furthermore, if you have, it also informs us about the density of trails. Because if you have one trail with a zone of influence, you know, which is the best attempt that we have to identify the impact of the trail, and the people traveling on that trail number. If you have a zone of influence, but you have a lot of trails in a certain area, then you start filling that area with zones of influence. So in a very practical way, I think when Sinuosity proposed 3 trails in the northeast quadrant, that if you put a zone of influence around those three trails, you more or less sort of blank out the entire northeast quadrant. Whereas if you just have one trail, which potentially provides the same human access, at least to the road, not to all the features on the way, but then you're not kind of swamping that area. So it informs us, first of all, about where a trail should be or where it shouldn't be. It also informs us about the density of trails. So it's a valuable concept because it allows quantification of the impact of the trail network, the trail system. So yeah, so I think it's really important to talk about zones of influence, and I think that's something that we really have a responsibility to incorporate into the management plan.
You know, you guys have talked a lot about this, an awful lot, and I guess for me, I'm not feeling frustrated, but I'm having trouble actualizing the concept. Like, show me a map of where 400-foot buffers look like on what we have.
Yeah.
If we put 400-foot buffers around everything, are there any trails and where are they? I guess for me to actualize and like work with that, I need to see something concrete, because I feel like I've heard a lot about what's in the study and a lot of the abstract, but I haven't seen the like, this is what that would look like. That's the missing piece.
I think New Hampshire Fish and Wildlife, that tool that they created for adaptation, taking a map and showing areas where trails shouldn't be and showing trails with zones of influence. And, you know, at a basic level, there's more layers to it. So it's down there. But that isn't that the tool that would be able to resolve this.
I haven't used that tool, but have we used it on?
No,
Yeah.
it's our Vermont's working on one, according to John Cart.
Well,
But
give me like the 2 cent, what would it look like
It
in
would
our
be,
forest
it
if we
would
used
be,
400-foot buffers? What would that look like? Like, give me the like big picture on that.
it would make it very difficult.
What would there be?
it-
Anything, nothing?
Well,
Like-
right now, the existing one, 75% of those trails. Now, what I don't know, I can't recall, is if this counts the trail they eliminated. But at least at one time, 75% of the trails above the parking line were gonna intrude on sensitive, above the power line, rather. We're going to intrude on a 200-foot buffer.
Okay, so like as a really rough guide, then what I could summarize this is just like a really rough thing to work off of is if we had 200-foot buffers, 75% of what is above the power line would not be able to
Of
be
those
there.
trails, yeah,
Would not be able to be there. Is that,
right, if we were worried about that.
I'm just trying to get
Yeah.
like a concrete
Yeah, no,
picture in my
it's
mind.
serious, which is why I think
Yes.
is,
So a 400-foot buffer would be like,
oh gosh, yeah.
Nothing.
That would be a lot more, right?
right.
And we've already got, then the other thing to look at is if you're looking at potential is slopes up there.
Well, let's just stick with the buffers for a second,
Well,
because we're all buffers
but
right now.
The combination, but the combination of those two, to me, says that building, it's just not a great place to build trails. We can still have public access. We can still, people can still go up there, walk, hunt, put up game cameras if they want, explore the place as we all have ourselves. But whether it's a place, whether we want it, because it also happens to be the most remote part of the forest. It'll be the most expensive place to build trails, the most expensive place to maintain them.
So this is, I'm categorized, this is one of the challenges.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the purpose of the conversation right now is identifying challenges.
yeah.
Yeah.
And scoping it out, I guess. But,
Can I like throw out a probing sort of question / lens? My mind keeps going back to my ecology education, where they would always come back to the point that an ecosystem is always in flux, right? It's not, there's not this actual climax
Right.
ecosystem. And so we are managing for something in what we decide. We're not gonna freeze time in a place. And so managing, am I hearing you say like wildlife is the priority? Because if we're,
It's equal to recreation.
well,
That's
I guess what I'm asking is like, if we're talking about, before we get into zones of influence or
Messages.
or impacts, do we have to identify what we want to make sure is not influenced and what we want, because like you were saying, there's the trees, there's wildlife, there's the vegetative layer, there's soils. And by, like, are you saying zero human influence on anything, or
No,
what's,
I'm saying.
what are
what
we
the-
trying not to influence? Like, are we talking?
Well, we're
Look
trying,
around for bobcat den and make sure we don't influence those.
yeah. Well, I think it starts, you can look at the easement, what the easement tells us, what we have to protect. So whether we protect it by leaving it alone or, outright protecting it some way. That we're fulfilling our job there. The easement also says provide recreational opportunities. So we have to do that too. So we're not, we're charged with, the agreement says we will protect. Gosh, it's a long list, productive forest land, wildlife habitats, biodiversity, on and on. And then right after that, though, that gives it equal weight, we're gonna provide recreational opportunities. And then down the line, when they say you can have snowmobiles, you can have mountain bike trails, as long as you're consistent with the purposes of the grant. And so I think that's really the guidance, that's the legal guidance. We don't have to get all that philosophical really about what we're trying to do. And we can let the natural processes go on. We don't want to screw them up, I think.
I guess for me, I'm just going back to that, and it looks like Bob has it, like if you're saying we need to consider what Meredith McNaughton, what other people are saying, 400, let's just take the number 400. Like, let's really write down, what does that mean? Like, okay, so it means there's only gonna be 25% of what was proposed.
Yeah, what would be the
Like,
impact?
I like a
The
really,
cost.
like, a harder
Sure.
parameter around that, like if I say we need to, let's just say the argument is, let's agree to 400-foot buffers. I want to know, what does that really mean? Like, I understand what it means for what you're saying, the impact is, could be on a plant or an animal, but what does that mean for what we're doing right here in this 428 acres?
Sure.
It means there's nothing above the power line almost. Or
See,
what does that mean?
there's maybe no new trail construction, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it.
Well,
That's all.
yeah, I think,
So it's not that ominous, but it's significant as
It's
hell.
different between, yes, so what you're saying is there would be no trails built, you can do dispersed recreation. Okay.
You could do that.
I'm just trying to
I
really
think,
like get my
I mean,
mind around.
yeah,
what that means.
We're talking rough.
It's hard to, we're talking about so trying to argue that a plant 400 feet away, so 1 1/3 football field away,
Mhm.
could be impacted by someone walking
No.
by.
Well, I think it would be
No,
an animal
wild
problem.
mammals.
Or, so that means we're targeting animals as and what animals, like, we wanna
Right.
identify that those animals are there,
We
period.
should, we
Right.
should, yeah.
Like it would be an animal that would be scared and would be running away and using up fuel.
Well,
that
that's
they-
like in the wildlife management, we're talking about umbrella keystone species. which
Yeah,
if-
I like that approach
Yeah.
of like identifying the species that really are indicative of the healthy habitat
Right.
and saying, where are they? And looking for changes in their,
And who has the expertise for that? I mean, I don't think we do in the committee, so this
Right.
kind of gets to the next issue, actually, on the agenda, but I think, you know, how do we're identifying challenges, how do we resolve them, can we do them with or without external comment, but maybe that comes under the RFP topic. And I would like to ask Daniel, you know, we're sort of getting near the time limit for this item, and two things about public input, maybe we should sort of open things up, but specifically Bob Lowe is saying, I've got a map I'd like to share screen.
Yeah,
And,
Yeah,
so
we can do that in a second, yeah.
maybe that's a
Yeah,
good time to
talk
have
about
it put it up, I think,
Yeah, I just wanna bounce off of kind of what Melissa was saying, cause I do think this, I see a little bit of a path forward and I wanna offer this to folks. Which is, I'd love us to put this in a parking lot, but say. The question of what do we do with zones of influence? And I think we need to answer this question, right? It can be their recommendations, it can be their mandates, you know, we can decide what we do with that. We can decide what width it is and we can decide how we use it. I think we've heard enough that I think we can say, this is something we need to consider, but it doesn't mean that we need to have it be law, right? We can be what it is, and then we decide how those impact any potential trail design. How it impacts any trail design. So we can set, basically going back to what Ian was saying, we can set the criteria, right? And I think it would be important for us to recognize the zones of influence and to set criteria around that. I think that's one way forward, is if we have that conversation, we're like, what is the criteria? I think the one thing that I just see as being a really difficult comparison, in some ways, I think buffer zones and zones of influence, it's like comparing apples and oranges. The buffer zones were largely created because of flora considerations and hydrological considerations, vernal pools, wetlands, streams, slope. So
Erosion control.
Yeah. When we talk about zones of influence, we're talking about wildlife. So in some ways, when we say there's a buffer here and there's a zone of influence here.
Well, the VLT buffers.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That we're sort of talking about two separate things, because
Right.
the sensitive area buffers are around, not usually around wildlife. And the zones of influence are around wildlife. And so we will need to kind of square those two things, you know, because we're talking about a zone of influence. I walk down a trail, I startle a warbler, the warbler flies off. Versus I put a trail next to this wetland and now I've changed the hydrology of it. They're two sort of totally separate approaches to what we think of as sensitive areas, so just throwing that out there is like a thing that we'll need to think about.
can we get Bob Lowe's map? I think that.
Yeah, but it's on your website, why don't you just pull up the website?
Well, I'm not quite sure which one he wants, but he says he's ready to share screen, and I'm saying, yeah.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Tries to share
Sure.
screen. Can you hear us, suggesting that, Bob?
I think you can just, put him on, you can just share screen with him.
Yeah, I mean, he has to share his screen. But I think security says that anybody can share their screen, so Bob Lowe should be able to share his screen with the map that he has in mind. Okay, great. Oh.
Oh my goodness, oops.
We had it, Bob, and we lost it.
We had it for a second.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe it's in very narrow.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's how much.
That's how much is left.
No, our work will be really easy now.
Is
That's
Can
it.
you try that one again?
Is that us or him that's causing that?
It was great, well, we could see it.
I just remember what that was in.
Satan.
One switch.
One dimension.
Yeah, it is something.
There we go.
There we go.
So that's 400 feet?
Oh, he's got
Four
four.
is bigger, yeah.
That's four now.
Is Bob mute?
He's jumping between them.
So that's 400 right there.
That's highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
You see the issue.
Whoops.
Well, Bob is muted, I just suggested he unmute so we can walk.
But I think we can kind of see.
Give me an
So-
idea.
You,
So yellow is 200,
yeah,
So, oops.
yes.
yeah,
The color below, right.
So we want to forbid animals from entering the zone of influence.
We can build a fence. Um,
So that's 400.
okay, so when you look at 400,
yeah.
if you'll leave it there for a second,
Hey, Bob, could you leave that one there for a sec?
I'm. So when you look at 400, like, what do you see? I'm not a really super visual person, I'm just curious, like, what do you see, like, what do you think when you look at 400, like, what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, it's hard to tell because we don't know volume of visitors. And so,
Right.
you know, the influences on the number of people and also the types of use. Are there a bunch of dogs off leash? That drastically increases the influence relative to, say, one biker or a runner or a walker.
I think it says that they own a particular species of bird and I want to build a nest. Those zone of influence areas colored yellow wouldn't be a good place to build a nest, and if I did, I might get, scared away from there
Mhm.
and not come back, or, any other sensitive species that's sensitive to human presence.
Right.
Would not be comfortable in those yellow areas, depending on the amount of traffic on those trails.
Well, I think that might be overselling it a little bit. I mean, I used to work at Audubon. There's tons of people walking the trails. There are tons of birds there building nests. I think what we're talking about is not like a no bird will build nests, but it's rather in studies they have found certain patterns of usage relative to human disturbance.
Some birds won't.
Yeah, some birds won't, right?
Affiliated, don't like people, so on. What that doesn't show,
Yes, thank you, Cecilia. Audubon has banned dogs. Good point. Cecilia noted that Audubon has banned dogs,
oh,
which we can totally do
I
that.
thought you said
Yeah.
Audubon has abandoned dogs.
He's done.
The sensitive areas on there, Bob? Which is, if they're not, that's okay, but it's really peppered with, I mean, that would be meaning, if nothing was sensitive up there, no big deal. But when you see how many sensitive areas are encroached
Well,
upon.
Brad, that's exactly the point. I think what I was making before is that like a sensitive area doesn't count the pileated, right? Like the pileated has nothing, there's no connection between the two.
Well, unless it's where pileated would eat, hypothetically.
Right, but I'm just saying in the easement, it's all around sort of hydrological factors. It's not about like bird habitat.
Not in the purposes.
Yes.
The purposes of the easement don't say protect the hydrology, they say protect productive forests, biodiversity, wildlife habitat, all those things.
Yeah,
They get really particular only when they're creating those EPCs, which is why I brought it up.
Right.
What are those meant to protect? Because with those pretty skimpy, if any, buffers on their EPCs, they're not doing much for the wildlife.
well, and that's why I think we need to define how we use the zones of influence, because there we're talking about wildlife, and I think we can do that, right? So we
Yeah.
can set our own criteria, just like just like we're kind of doing now, looking at this.
Right. Right.
Okay. Well, I think we need to move on, but I do want to give some time for public comment. Oh, I think Bob's trying to do
It's tough doing an overlay.
Yeah, sorry, Bob, we appreciate so much being able to just see the 400-foot and 200-foot buffers. I think that was really helpful. Yeah, that was really great. Thank you. So what I'd like to do is let's offer a chance for the public to comment, and then we'll move on to the RFP. We have our list.
Did you want to add anything, right?
Do I want to add anything?
Yeah, I feel like we've all talked a lot more than you have.
No, I'm happy being a note taker.
I'm wondering where your mind goes towards how this has played out in your land. And just
well,
like
it's
anecdotally.
it's private property, so I want public input, but I don't have to have public input.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking in terms of how it plays out habitat or ecological integrity wise.
Well, specifically, I was very concerned when we were having Jeep and ATV traffic on Snipe Ireland Trail prior to it becoming a trail. So I hired a consultant in New Hampshire to study wildlife movement across the class 4 section of road, to try to to show that there's a lot of wildlife moving across the road. To tell both select boards, this is an area that we need to protect. And they both Jericho and Richmond select boards supported that and removed vehicular traffic from it. And now it's just walkers and some mountain bikes, and that was a huge change and very purposeful. That's probably the nearest it comes to me. We do have a lot of walkers and a lot of cross-country skiers. And a lot of hunters that are dispersed and on the property, so. We've got to find a balance of human uses and protecting wildlife. And I think that's the conversation here, is the balance, and because it's a public forest, and the public has a right to be on it, so, and it's mixed use, it's not just, in my mind, it's not just walkers, so.
Oh, Cecilia answered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Cecilia, about sort of a trail network being concentrated rather than dispersed. And we do have,
The zones that way overlap.
Right,
So
right.
you get, in a way,
You get more for your money.
you get,
yeah.
Yeah.
And we do have, you know, as convenient as the power line is, there are, you know, there's sort of like this a separation below and above the power line, both in topography and sensitive areas, that is worth sort of thinking about and talking to. Great.
I'm surprised that we don't see people wanting to speak from the public, and could we just make a call?
Yeah,
if anyone wants to chime in at this point.
Yep.
I would just like to echo what a few people have said, and just that I think it is important that there is going to be compromise here. Like, I know some people would like to respect the strict buffer zone, but because this is a mixed use forest, I don't think it's realistic that we can just not put trails in, or just use the existing skid or logging trails that are in there. I think that it's very helpful to see the buffers and how the trails might, affect the wildlife that's currently in there, but I don't think it's realistic that we would not put trails in or and just leave it be, or to put all those trails in either. I think that it's just very revealing about how much of a challenge this is, right? Reconciling the difference between the two. I do think that sort of trail density in one area would probably be better. Like when we looked at the map, you could see there were a few pockets where there weren't trails, where the wildlife would be sort of able to do their own thing. So I do believe also in I might be conflating the Sue Moore's talk, or maybe it was the balancing conservation and recreation, but I believe there were some recommendations that perhaps having high density below the power lines, south of the power lines would be a good way to put a lot of trails in to allow people more access if they want to go on trails, and still allowing sort of a separate area of the forest to be reserved for dispersed foot traffic so that the wildlife can be at peace there, I suppose.
I wonder if this could be something that the wildlife, I'll call it stewardship committee, subcommittee, working group, could think about, which is, you know, how are we thinking about zones of influence and what criteria we might set for trail design around that? And I think that, that's not to say that's the final say, but I think just having some recommendations come back to us to say, here's a way we might look at it, and it could just be, you know, we need to use Bob's maps, which are really helpful when we're talking about trail design, and we look at those to get a better picture of things. I think there's lots of ways that we can use that information. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it.
Another sort of variable that comes to mind talking about this is a trail can be so many different things depending on how it's designed and how the access is designed. And we just in Richmond.
Oh, we can hear you, Bob.
Finally, I'm sorry, I couldn't figure it out. I'll comment after you're done with your comment.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say, we could probably think of like really different extremes of the amount of traffic that a trail gets based on its design, like contrasting Snipe or Sunshine with Chamberlain Hill as like two extremes of Chamberlain was designed to facilitate more traffic, and it gets a lot of, and it is designed specifically for mountain bikers, and so and is marketed as such. And the town has built parking access versus Sunshine or Snipe, where
It's very limited.
yeah, and you wouldn't argue that as like a heavy impact trail zone. And so we get to design in different parts of the forest. And I think parking limitation does a lot of that design on its own. So we, in some ways, just.
So does topography.
And topography, totally, yeah, and distance from trailhead.
Right.
But lumping all trails together in terms of like what the impact would be.
Right.
Is probably not accurate.
Go ahead, Bob.
So sorry, I couldn't figure out how to become unmuted, but now magically it happened. In answer to Cecilia's chat, I can put up any sensitive area you wish with any buffer you wish, if at some point you guys want to look at that sort of a thing.
Do not put any sensitive areas up on the camera.
In any case, I think it would, since that could be dozens and dozens and dozens of maps. Maybe you could suggest some that you'd like to look at, or maybe we should have a workshop at some point, or I just come in and show you what's there. Enough said.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thanks. It was a great visual reminder to go dive in on my own and get deep with all those maps. Yeah.
So we're running a little over time, we may have a little buffer. Has time.
Great, yeah. So I think what we can do is, we also have limited brain power. So this is a good beginning, and I think just having a good, thoughtful, respectful, and open and curious conversation is a really great learning tool for all of us, and I think gets us really far, even if, you know, we're not all on the same page, but we have a good map for it, at least for this one issue, which has come up. You know, Brad, you've been bringing this to the committee for as long as I've been on it, and it's really nice to just have a conversation about it and
It's amazing.
say, okay, how do we move forward with this? So thank you all, and thanks for the public for listening to us. No one has any hands up, so I'll just go forward with our next item, which is the RFP that Brad and Ian put forth. Do you all want to set this up yourself in terms of the discussion? I'm happy to just hand it over to you all.
I'd like to make a sort of bridge comment.
Yeah, okay.
you know, I think, things have been moving slowly, let's say, for the last 5 years, you know, there's a level of frustration that, we need to have a new management plan that needs to be approved. And, that then can be used to get beyond the issue of trails and other, principles that determine how the forest is managed. Well, so my bridging comment is that, we've identified challenges, a lot of them, and a lot of them are very familiar. So the question is, how do we resolve them? Do we pursue them in some kind of systematic way within this committee and come to a resolution or maybe a vote or whatever it takes? Or do we kind of maybe throw up our arms and say, at this present rate of progress, we're never going to make it, but an external consultant with suitable expertise would be able to do it, but you know, obviously with our input, with public input. So that's how I've seen the idea of the RFP, that it defines how we would recruit an external consultant. And what Brandon and I have been doing with input from others, we've been getting comments coming in, and Bob Lowe has always been helpful over the previous months, really. What we're trying to do is, I think, is not only specify an RFP, but also move beyond that and identify as much as possible the material that we would like an external consultant to be working with. It wouldn't necessarily go into the RFP that's published and open to bids, but it's a really, I believe, a really useful process to be able to identify the materials that a consultant would work with. Now, I know there's another option, which is that if we can refine this plan, really, this set of guidelines for a consultant, if we can define it really accurately, then we could be able to do it within the committee, or with bringing in expertise from the community, so that rather than putting out a contract, we would assemble work on it, which would include the committee, and I think necessarily would have external people. So that's certainly the way that I've been viewing it, as putting material into the text that's in the packet today. Brad and I have really accelerated that process in the last few weeks, 2-3 weeks really, since the last meeting, to get a lot of material there, which we believe is, well, both helpful and important.
Yeah, the idea, I think Julian stated it at one of our meetings where he said the job of our job with the writer, whoever it is really to set that person up for success, and to just toss this to them, to somebody, I think is not the way to go. There's some point where we've got to be able to give that person enough information, and not let them, not hand off the list of challenges to them. That I think, if we continue working like we were tonight, we can provide some good guidance to that person when the time comes. So we tried, just to present enough background here to to try to entice somebody into this project and make it look possible. That we aren't just throwing a bunch of, it's not starting from scratch. There's good, solid, plenty of words that are good. I think one of the issues is trying to reorganize it and make it more useful to somebody. I know reading through that thing again this weekend, holy mackerel, there are parts that, after a while, it's, my back in a biology class, and so I think some of that can be moved to the background. I wouldn't lose it at all. It's important to substantiate what we're saying, but I think that we want somebody who can exercise kind of an editorial on a lot of what's there, but almost pick up some parts verbatim.
So I appreciate very much you guys digging into this RFP, and there's a lot of work has gone into this. So I just want to like show my appreciation at the onset, because this is, you know, it's a ton of work we've put into it, and I think you've identified some really good key points we want to get, whether within this committee, within our community, or with the consultant. When reading back through the management plan, I saw a gap that I think, if I was to hire a consultant, would be like my first gap I'd want them to fill, which is that we don't have a good, within the management plan, we do not have a good organizational method from our management objectives to the management tasks to the things that we talk about. So we have a list of objectives and then just kind of a list of tasks, but they don't feed into each other. And the thing that I would love to see is, like, with the conversation we had today about zones of influence, that would feed into a management task, which then feeds into a management objective. And we as a committee can be up here at 30,000 feet talking about those management objectives and not so into the weeds about, like, is it 200 or 300? Like, we can get there, but I think the bigger picture we're gonna have to ask ourselves is like, okay, do these management objectives make sense? And do the tasks that come out of that, are those tasks important now? Because like you were saying, they were written 5 years ago, right? So we should ask, like, do they need to be updated? Or how's all this work that we've been doing, how does it feed into that? And there's a level of organization there that I think takes a lot of work. And so I know I do that in my job, and it's a lot of stuff, right? I make whole like Excel files where you're linking up all of these goals and priorities to all these tasks that you're doing, down to like, I'm pulling an acre of this invasive species right here because it leads to this priority and this priority and this goal. And so I would love to see someone be able to help us sort of sift out these details from the bigger picture stuff that allows us to really focus on the higher level important things. So I just want to throw that out there as like, I would love to, and I would be happy to help with that. And maybe that's someone, you know, within our committee or community who can help with that. But in looking back at the management plan, that was the one thing where I was like, oh, it'd be really great if these objectives and tasks and the stuff we've been working on really all work together.
Do you have an example? Do you have an example then you could show?
Yeah, I have.
I have trouble. There's some part of that is so abstract. I have a hard time getting my head around.
Right.
And I'm not questioning it a bit, but I've always struggled with what's a goal, what's an objective.
Right.
Drives me crazy.
Right.
But it would be great to see that.
Like the simplest version would be a management objective is to limit the impact of invasive species on native plant species.
Okay.
You know, a task would be identify where the main areas of invasive species are. You know, subtasks would then be contract with someone to control those species, do continuous monitoring. And you know what I mean? So you start breaking down the tasks into manageable things that you can do. So you're not like, how do I deal with invasives here? But it's like, okay, I start with this, I do this, that, this stuff. But I can definitely send that out as a.
That'd be great.
Like, some examples.
I would say that personally, I'm totally new to this, you know. I don't know about management. Certainly I don't know about collaborative management. It's just not in my skill set. So I've been trying to learn from other people and part of discussions with Daniel, which have been really, to me personally, helpful in seeing how a management plan can be established and designed, and so my understanding is that it's really helpful to start with clear vision statements, and then those feed into management objectives, and those feed into management actions. And there are, I understand there's different ways of doing it. There are more complex structures that one can use, but I can handle the 3 steps. But it means that having a vision is really an important first step, and that's something that Brad and I've spent some time on, and Brad even separated vision and mission and put them into a draft document that's in the packet. And the vision is very much derived from the easement and the purposes. I think there are 5 or 6 purposes specified in the easement, so those were reworded into a form that we thought would make a vision statement. Anyway, that's supposed to be helpful. It certainly helped me to get a sense of how to tackle this and how a management plan ought to be structured.
But that vision is far from cast in stone. Far from cast in stone. I mean, that's just our, product of our thinking. And so, I don't know, maybe that's another challenge for the list. I don't know where that would fit under process maybe, because it sort of encompasses everything. I don't know. But that might be helpful. And then the mission gets into some of the tasks actually. So maybe it's more of a list of tasks than a mission. I don't know. It's, it gets to a point where it's semantics, but that would be worth, I think, thinking about reading that. And
So, I just want to stop you for a second.
Yeah,
Is the
do it.
vision statement that you are proposing, this one here that says, here presenting in a concise form, the quote purposes spelled out in the
No.
vision? Quote purposes, page 2, and note. Is that your proposed?
that
vision
was
statement?
one, that's kind of how it began, and then
Okay,
there's also another in the packet that looks like, I think it looks like this.
oh, there's another one. Okay.
Yeah, but.
Is it?
So there are 2 things. I mean, it just shows our thinking is moving along, and that we landed somewhere, probably more towards, this is a little bit later. And it basically, the only difference is, I think it sticks that vision language up at the front, so. The idea, and it grew out of the RFP, thinking that we would want somebody to get an overall feel of what we want this plan to say. Not that we're gonna leave it at this, we'll tell them, we're gonna have this or that. We really wanna have this, you don't have to go out and research this on your own. But we kind of want them on board with the spirit.
I wonder if a good next step would be. Because I think we should also have other times where we kind of review the RFP. Would you and Ian be open to shopping this around to perhaps some consultants who you think might be a good fit, just to get like a first glance of professionals in the field, like saying, this is what seems reasonable, this is something that like we can do, and I would be happy to do that. I have a bunch of notes here just from a land management perspective about things I think person who creates management plans would be able to do, and the places where it's more of like a facilitator would do that work. And we could kind of think about, what might be possible, what might not be possible, in the scope of work, but I think it could be good to kind of just get some outside eyes on it and
Yeah.
say, here's our first go at this, what do you think?
Well, I don't know if it's appropriate to step back before doing that. I'm interested in a sense of this committee, and including Cecilia, and anyone else who wants to chime in. Should we be setting up a contract with them? So, or should we try and do this in the community work group, the committee plus others? In other words, what's the sense? Is this time to say we need an individual consultant to help us, or is this time to say we need to have some kind of a committee, a large committee or a reduced committee to work on it?
I thought we had agreed on this is the time to have external help.
I agree with that.
I think we'd already discussed and settled that.
Okay, we still
You
believe that.
agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm,
we have
okay,
discussed,
good.
and I still believe it. I have not changed my mind.
Yeah.
I believe it was also mentioned that, you know, they're doing the, you know, the writing part. But then this committee and the community still has a lot of the, smoothing over the challenges part to feed into this
Yeah.
writer's work. Because they shouldn't be the ones making the decisions on all of the challenges. That's committee.
No, I think as a professional writer, they wouldn't, they would
Yeah,
say,
sure,
hey,
sure.
community.
I just wanted to
community and
clarify.
committee, like, you have this issue that's not settled yet, I need your.
Yeah, so it is the time for external help, but not to solve the challenge.
Yes.
Is what I would say.
And I see their role as being, say, we come up with a really good zone of influence sort of guideline. We're like, here's how we want to use this. And they say, great, I'll take that. I'm gonna put it into the document in this form. It's gonna live under this objective, under this task, and here's how it's organized within the whole. They do all of that work so that we can focus on making the decisions. And I think that would just be really helpful.
Okay, so I think maybe my question should have been phrased in a, with some shades of meaning. I mean, or a kind of a spectrum from, do we hand the material to a consultant and say, here, work with us? Or do we specify things within this committee? You know, to what extent do we specify the things like zone of influence? You know, or should we have an individual who has the expertise to be able to advise us authoritatively?
No, that, I think we do that. Oh, that's-
I agree.
Okay.
I think that you would not find a person who would be comfortable saying, I'm the expert here. I think they could give resources, they could provide studies and things like that, but I think ultimately it's on us to say, we've done the reading, we've discussed, we've listened to the community.
So we have the expertise and we also have the time commitment, the capability, you know, as a committee and as individuals to put in the effort to answer all these questions and specify what is variable.
Yeah. And I'm also hoping, like, I think what Chase was talking about before is really important of all this work that we've done already. My hope is that with like, someone could help us incorporate that, you know, and say, hey, all this work we've done, like, this is where it can fit in. You know, do you want to, you know, put it in here? That, you know, it's helpful for that stuff not to get lost.
It would help me that maybe towards the beginning or the end of these meetings to just reflect on the timeline of what we're trying to do. We had the timeline was set maybe 2 meetings ago or more, but if we could continue to just visit the timeline of what we're trying to accomplish so that we can feel like we're getting closer to something as time goes on. And if we're not getting closer, then that's a signal too. But that would help me.
So how to do that? Should the RFP working group take that as a immediate assignment, a high priority assignment to set up a timeline? And I guess incorporate the list of challenges that we have now as part of the part of that timeline, resolving those issues.
Might we use the working group approach to maybe parcel out the challenges
Yeah,
as well, and bring them back?
yeah,
Maybe.
that sounds great. Kind of do a kind of proposed, you know, kind of way to move forward.
Again, to the timeline right now, we mustn't forget rights, 5 minutes, and otherwise, I think we're in good shape, and we just need to finalize the next meeting date, but should we at this point, is this a good point to say, okay, we have a plan, and move on to rights? questionable, rights of way.
So I received an email within the last couple of days from Vermont Electric Power Supply. Is there any update from us on our desire to provide the right of way for the power line company? And I was starting to draft an email back to Allison, and I drafted the email, but I sent it to Ian and Daniel and said, can we talk about this? And they've had the property, the road surveyed. And that was done sometime last summer. I didn't know about that until I saw survey pins along it. And so I reached out and they sent me a copy of the survey. And it's a 25-foot right of way from Route 2. It goes up to the power lines and then goes east and then goes west. And it, looks fine, except right where the parking area is, it basically takes up the parts of the front of all of the cars. So that isn't gonna work because we can't eliminate any parking there. So that was in my email, the draft email, I said, that's an issue right there. We need to either narrow the right of way they get or move the right of way further to the east to the property line so that we're not limiting any parking. And then I had two other concerns that are my concerns. One is they put a big bridge in with concrete abutments on the west side to service a pole. They took the bridge out, but they left the abutments. And it's quite a fall from those abutments into the stream. It's probably 12 feet on both sides. It's pretty dangerous. So I said, I've asked her once in an email to consider taking them out. And she said, no, we're not gonna take them out. And then, so this email just reiterates that. Again, I haven't sent the email because we need to discuss it maybe at the next meeting. And then the other issue I have is, the old Vast Trail to the west goes, over to the, Kelly's property, or from Kelly's to, the Andrews. And, it is utilized to some extent by the power company, even though they put these new roads in. And the Kellys have a new road, and in this email, I've asked them to, it's way outside of the right of way. Perhaps stop using it because you're not maintaining it, and we had VYCC help in putting water bars, and their ATVs and heavy equipment are ruining the water bars, and it's all washing out. So that was, again, my suggestion is that they stop using it. And but I think if again, I think before next meeting, if one of you folks and you and me can meet with the town manager about this proposed email to see if, and maybe get some legal advice from the town attorney to see if it's the appropriate. Do we have any leverage to get them to take the what's the word, concrete blocks out? And do we have any leverage to get them to stop using the old Vast Trail when they now have a new road system?
Seems crazy.
Right, and so that was my wish to.
Well, I think the town attorney will probably be interested in knowing there's 12-foot drop off in a concrete thing
Right.
into the stream that's on town property,
Right.
even though it's in the easement.
Right. Yeah, there's on both sides, so, that's the update. And I did in the form of a draft email, because that's where my head was at when I drafted it, so.
May I ask a question about the access, the access between Valley View and ACF? I'm just curious how much they're actually using that with equipment, because they did pave the way from Valley View Road extension all the way up to the next pole from, I think, where they installed those abutments in the temporary bridge. So they basically paved out with gravel, just like they did in ACF.
Yep.
So I'm not sure Yeah, it seems like there would be no reason for them to use that section in between. I didn't realize they were using that. Is there?
They
any
still
other
are.
kind of use it's been getting and.
Some, they're not bulldozers all the time,
Yeah.
but we use the word connectivity for, mountain biking or for wildlife. They're using it, that's connectivity as they are looking at the power lines going from east to west or west to east.
Without putting their bridge back. Cause
Well, they
by
don't-
severing that, taking the bridge out, severed the trail.
No, the bridge only goes to one pole,
Oh, okay.
right, so. So it's, and they use a lot of contractors, Greenmount Power, electric power supply, they both have right of ways, and they both use contractors. And the contractors just go where it's the easiest.
That's what I was just gonna say. They're probably doing it because it's the easiest. not
It's the, yeah,
because they're-
so instead of turning around, going back and hopping on Route 2 and coming up around, so. So I'll nudge that to the town manager, if I may, and try to set up a meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Great.
The email that you're referring to that has those 4 points you just outlined.
Right.
You said, I got it yesterday and Daniel too. I guess, do you want to send it to the whole committee, or you're saying really the next step is to?
Well, I don't, why don't you forward it to the committee? I'll let you do
I can
that.
do that.
Yeah,
Cecilia's question, right? Who are the Kellys?
they're the Kellys, are the property owners to the west off of the old Bass Trail. They live at the very eastern end of Valley View Extension.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Doing all that. That's.
Yeah.
That is not sexy work. That is grunt work right there.
We do.
Before we set our date, I don't know, does any comments from the public before we set a date for next time and then move to adjourn?
I have a quick question about potentially, Brad, you had mentioned parsing out some of the challenges
Yeah.
in working groups.
Yeah.
Just to continue things moving versus waiting a month until
Yes.
having another really, chunky conversation about this. Is there going to be more communication on how those are those gonna get broken up by the topics that you sort of filed those under, and like who's gonna talk about that in working groups, or is that just something to consider for next meeting?
I think what we could do, I'm curious what you all think, if I can send out that list, and if working groups want to. And this can be in a reply all because we're just assigning tasks, wanna just say, hey, we as a group want to do these, whatever things. These items.
Sort of a side action.
Yeah, we can kind of do it that way.
Okay, let's just be careful though, because the last time I was like, okay, I want to be on one and I did get on that one
Yeah.
now, but like you're on 3 and you're on 2. So I just want to make sure we all have an equal chance. If people are like jumping on the ones that they want to get on, that everybody has a chance, so. Not sure,
Yeah.
yeah. so-
I did get the impression that the working groups were exclusionary and that there was a maximum number of people.
Well, we have to keep under the quorum.
We do.
Oh, sure, I guess it doesn't apply to me, because I'm not.
Well, I think there was.
Did we ever resolve that though, the bit about why couldn't you have a quorum? So let's say 5 people, as long as you don't decide anything, or is it just the mere, it's the mere discussion?
That's
the
right.
public
it's
meeting.
open. Because the
Discussion.
public isn't
Five
there.
people in a group means you need to make it available to the public.
And it's gotta be warned.
Even if they're not part, even if there's no decision.
Correct.
That's. correct.
Okay, sorry.
So, but keeping it with what Melissa's saying, because I do think it's an important point,
Yeah.
is that I think that the task of the working groups would be to propose something that would be discussed with the whole group. So it wouldn't be like, we made a decision, here's what we're doing, but it'd rather be like, here's some ideas, here's a way forward, what do you all think? Is that kind of address kind of what one of your
Right, I'm
concerns
just
was,
saying,
like-
I want everybody, I mean, not just for myself, but
Yeah.
everybody who would like to participate in one of those to have
Yeah.
access. So if we're doing a sign up online and I sign up for 5,
Right.
then, Chase goes, oh, there's none left on that one.
Right.
So,
Well, I think another part of that is, what we heard about from the select board and their opinion about subcommittees. That working groups or subcommittees have to be less than a quorum.
Yeah.
That should be public to the extent at least that they're publishing, reporting on what they're doing. So my reading of that is that working groups should report to, provide a report for the packet, so that when the agenda goes out, it has any update from working groups
That's good.
available to the committee, but
Yes.
also the public.
Absolutely.
Well, what if we made, to Melissa's point, make it, no limit on signing up? And then, if working group A is oversubscribed and B isn't, maybe those folks could, as often, who care, I don't care, they'll jump on, or give up a seat here and take one over there,
It's good to have a conversation.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But
let's see
you're
how
right.
it sugars out. We can create I'll create a document and then I'll, so people can sign up.
That'd be great.
Is that a baking analogy?
Sugar out?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a syrup. You hungry?
So. And a
So,
good cookie supply.
I know, yeah.
This whole time.
can you all discuss quickly the next meeting, and if that date works, while I write this down?
Yeah, the fourth Monday is the 25th of March.
That should work.
I'll be out of town. I won't be at that meeting, so I'll be out of town for all of March. So. We'll see you all in April.
Norway, Mexico,
I'll be in Turkey, yeah.
Turkey. Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
So is it March 25th?
March 25th, and if we have a quorum,
That is my fiance's birthday.
Oh, boy.
No, you have to come to the meeting.
You can come to the meeting.
Yeah.
That's the last day of Ash's.
it's looking like, should we hold the full committee and make sure we have a quorum for the 25th?
I will be up.
So Brad's away,
I'm gonna be away,
you're away.
possibly able to zoom in, though, but
So what are we gonna do?
Vinta's aging that night.
She gets one more gray hair.
So are you here or not here that night?
So how many
Probably
people
not.
were not here that night?
I'm not
We've
here.
got three.
I'm here,
Okay,
but I'd like to be available if she comes home from work. Often she sleeps at work Monday night,
oh, okay.
but for special things, she'll try to come home.
Brad, when are you back?
April 2nd, 3rd, 2nd or 3rd.
Could we push it a week?
Yeah, I still won't be back.
Yeah, unless we pushed it like till later.
But when we have a quorum,
You're going
because
Cancun?
Julian will be here, so
We'll have to-
2,
we'll have to-
Oh, fun.
Mexico
3,
City.
maybe 4 people.
Cecilia was pointing out the new spelling of the country Turkey. Cecilia, can you give a yes or no for the 25th?
That's the Turkish.
March, Monday.
Yeah, Cecilia says that she'll be there.
I think we can try to make it
Let's-
work.
Yeah, try to make it work and,
Right.
Brad and Alex be in the sun.
Oh,
We'll be struggling. with
let's try
that.
to do a subcommittee meeting again soon. I'm out next week for school break. For travels.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Real quick, so Cecilia, can we get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate it.